Remain seated, please. Permanecer sentados, por favor.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
Our largest single-theme land expansion ever.
Now we want you to share with us our latest and greatest dream.
Matterhorn Matt presents Matterhorn Mondays. Welcome, everybody, to episode 137 of Matterhorn Mondays, coming to you live from the Outpost. I am your host, Matterhorn Matt.
And I'm and I always emphasize this, temporary. It's okay, calm down. Temporary co-host, Jeremy.
Alex will be back by the end of the month, hopefully. Maybe in a few weeks, I think is when he said. So excited to have Alex. We miss Alex. Guys, go tweet some love to Alex if you haven't already subscribed to him. But we are, of course, joined by special guest, Mr. Rob Plays, everybody. Why don't you go ahead and say hello to everybody listening, to everybody watching along here today.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me again. I am, of course, also joined by my best friend, Christine, and my other best friend, Executive Chairman, Robert Iger. And we're all here to talk Disney, but I'm mostly going to do the talking on this end. They don't want to chime in too much.
Yeah, I've heard Bob is a little shy when it comes to this kind of stuff, so...
Yeah, he doesn't have a whole lot to talk about when it comes to Disney, it turns out.
That would make some sense. But anyways, you guys know Mr. Rob. He's been on the show many times before. Glad to have him back. It's always a treat when we have Mr. Rob Plays on the show. And this is the first time we've had Jeremy and Rob on the same show together. So that'll be very, very interesting, very fun, I hope. But as always, you guys know the drill. Links to all of our social media will be down in the description below. And if you'd like to be wished a happy birthday live on the stream, you can do so by clicking the Google link down in the description. Submit your name, your birthday in the Google form, and we will add it to our birthday calendar. And we do have 3 birthdays this week. Monday the 27th, Charlie's birthday, as well as, I don't know if this is like someone's username, Star Wars' birthday, or if it's like just in general, happy birthday to the franchise of Star Wars. So either way, if this is somebody's username, happy birthday to you. And as well, this Wednesday, the 27th, we have Jason, otherwise known as Interactive Realm. Big fan of the show. Big fan of, I believe he's Alex's channel sponsor. So happy birthday to Mr. Jason, and happy birthday to everybody else who didn't happen to submit their birthday. Like I said, link in the description if you'd like to be wished a happy birthday. And now for the most important announcement, you guys. 575-386-5814. Ring in if you'd like to leave a voicemail, if you'd like to voice your opinion on any of the topics we do have at hand. As we've been saying for the previous million episodes, it is now mandatory to call in and leave a voicemail, you guys. If you do
mandatory, it's a requirement.
Yeah.
In fact, and Matt, I hope you don't mind that I share this, but last night, Matt, middle of the night, Matt, I get a phone call. It's Matt. He said he's bawling his eyes out. He's crying.
Yeah.
He says, "I'm shaking. I'm trembling." I said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And he said, "What if nobody calls?" And I said, "No, that it's gonna be okay. So please, just for my sake, so I don't have to get a phone call like that again.
Yeah,
please
on,
call
guys.
In, please.
Think of Jeremy. He doesn't want to be woken up at 5 a.m. I'm sure he's already up that late anyways to begin with, but
that's true.
Again, you guys, we do love hearing all what you guys have to say. So 575-386-5814 if you have any thoughts on what we're talking about. We love to hear your voice, and it's a fun way to interact other than the live chat that we have here. So yeah, but feels like it's been a while since we've done the show. So before we start, Mr.
You say
Rob,
that every week.
I say that every week. It's only been 7 days, exactly 7 days. But Mr. Rob, how has your week been going thus far? You having a great weekend, a great week?
I think all things considered, I'm doing pretty well. I've fallen down this deep rabbit hole of YouTube videos about sailing recently, which is a whole new venture that I probably would not be able to pull off in real life, but it's one of those, you know, sometimes you just find a thing on YouTube and you're just like, all right, I'm all in on this now for like a month or so, and then I'll move on to something else. So I've just been, taking it easy and watching sailing videos.
Nice. Very nice.
It's
well,
very
Mr.
relaxing.
Jeremy. Yeah. What about you, Jeremy? How's your week been going so far?
I don't even know anymore. I don't know.
It's fair, yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. It's starting to, and this kind of scares me, but it's all starting to feel like the new normal, which is kind of petrifying when you think about that for too long. But it's fine. I can't really complain that much.
Well, we hope everybody watching, everybody listening has been having a great week, a great weekend so far, a great day so far, you guys. We appreciate every single one of you. But I think, guys, I hate to say it, I don't have any Snapple this week for Matt Snaps. I know I'm a fraud. I failed, you guys, but I figured we'll at least play the theme song just because it's such a great theme song, but there is no Matt Snaps this week. I apologize. It will be returning next week once I remember to buy Snapple from Walgreens. But here is the lovely Matt Snaps jingle just for all of you lovely people. Try make up for myself, you guys.
A whole wide world of knowledge awaits underneath the cap. It's once again time this week for Matterhorn Snaps.
As always, very amazing. Yeah, very great theme song.
And I make up a random fact that would be on a...
Guys, real fact number 955, Matterhorn Mondays has started, and it's time to get into this week's news from the peak. There it is, you guys. Great transition.
That was excellent.
Thank you.
Oh, wow.
All right, here we go. News from the peak, everybody. Oh, the graphic is messed up.
We now present...
All right, well... Let me see. Okay, well, anyways, you guys get the idea. News from the peak. It's been a little rough when it comes to the motion graphics this week. What a fail, exactly. But anyways, you guys already know what time it is. News from the peak. And we do have some really interesting bits of news that we happened to... Jeremy and I actually scaled the peak of the Matterhorn this morning. 6 in the morning, we woke up, went straight to the peak, and we thought, wow, some great pieces of news.
Look at all this news.
Yeah, and we put it in our knapsack, scaled back down, and here it is, everybody. First bit of news from the peak. Disney, and Disney is 100% spelled correctly in that graphic as well. Disney is developing a live-action The Snow Queen film, reportedly, based on the classic Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale. Now, this is not Disney's first time basing a story off the live or after the fairy tale as the popular Frozen franchise is loosely based upon the story. A version of the Snow Queen character also appeared in ABC's Once Upon a Time, and this will not be a live-action version of the film Frozen. So that is a great, if you guys are either fans or not fans of the live-action, this is not a live-action version of that. It will likely adhere more closely to the original story. And for our second bit of news from the peak, Walt Disney World is the current frontrunner for the NBA's return. Now, we did discuss this previously, I believe a few episodes ago. I, for one, am very excited about this. I miss sports, you guys. The finals, I think, the playoffs were supposed to happen last month, I think, for the NBA. I can't remember off the top of my head, but like I said, we did touch on this briefly before. Players and coaches would be quarantined together, likely in the facilities of a Walt Disney World Resort hotel. Regular testing is also a requirement before resuming the games, and like we said, this would be taking place at the ESPN's Wide World of Sports complex. The NBA does hope to resume the season by mid-July, following the leads of UFC, NASCAR, and the PGA Tour, who have already resumed sporting events without crowds. Again, I'm very excited for this. I miss sports. I hope that football starts as normal, but we'll see. And for our final bit of news from the peak today, this is great news as well. Disney has revealed new renderings of the Vacation Club Tower. It's still happening, you guys. Still in development at the Disneyland Resort as the addition to the Disneyland Hotel. I believe we touched on this. It was a while ago, it feels like, but I'm happy to hear that this is still going forward. The renderings do look beautiful, as you can see here. Let's see, here's an alternate picture here. The side facing the street will be built in a step design in order to blend with the rest of the neighborhood, and plans are still under review by the city of Anaheim. Again, I'm excited that this has not been put on the chopping block, unlike a lot of previous expansions to the resort over the past couple years. But that has been this week's news from the peak. Jeremy, do you have any thoughts you'd like to talk about here on any of the topics that that we ran down for News from the Peak?
Yeah, I actually think an adaptation of the Snow Queen that is actually like the Snow Queen is actually pretty cool, and I think that that's going to be something, if they do it well, granted, it will be pretty exciting, I think. But who knows?
I hope. Yeah, and Mr. Rob, do you have any thoughts on any of the bits of news that we ran down straight from the Peak today?
I did stare at the Snow Queen one for a hot second because I was very confused, and I was like, "Didn't they do this already?"
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I think if you're going to reapproach a subject, this is an interesting way to do it. Like, can you imagine if they did this with some of the other fairy tales? Like, they, maybe a more faithful adaptation of the original, or just a wildly different take on the story, as opposed to kind of what we've been getting, which is just more of an adaptation of the animation. So, like, yeah, it obviously depends on whether they're going to pull this off in a way that's quality, but it's an interesting approach for sure. And as far as the NBA at Disney World, I find that really exciting. I'm really fascinated by the potential logistics of all of that. Like, everything that's going on, it's interesting already looking ahead at what the history of all this is going to be, and just like how do you manage bringing the entire NBA to Disney World, and what does that look like from an operations standpoint? I'm very fascinated by what the details end up being. Where do they stay? Like, you're gonna put them in an all-star? Probably not, right? Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, weren't there rumors floating around about which hotels would be their sort of lodgings? Or I think I saw headlines regarding that either this week or last week, when this was kind of like in rumor land. So yeah,
it'll be interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Rob. I was not going to say anything more important, but
proximity-wise, it would make sense the All-Stars, because they're just closer and they're just so much larger. They can hold more people. But then at the same time, it's like, they're going to spend the whole season in the All-Stars. Are the players going to want to do that? I don't know.
Yeah. Again, I'm very excited.
Demand the Grand Floridian.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be something? Well, like I said, I for one am very excited about this. The worlds collide, you guys. NBA, second favorite sport for me, and of course Disney. I'm very excited to see how this pans out. But that has been this week's News from the Peak. And before we move on, I forgot to say this at the top of the episode. I'd like to apologize if you hear any sniffling from me or sneezing. I have really bad allergies today, you guys. I took an allergy pill, and it's just starting to kick in right now. So hopefully that subsides, I don't know how to pronounce that word, into the rest of the episode. So if you guys, I just wanted to point that out there. But yeah, we do have, like I said, some great bits of news from the Peak. But of course, it is time to move into our first main topic of the episode. And what a main topic this is. This really came out of nowhere, especially for me this last week. Disney corporate restructuring and executive shakeups. Now, as you can see from this very beautiful picture here of good old Joshy boy, Mr. Josh D'Amaro, he, of course, is involved in this. So Monday morning, Disney did announce a restructuring of their executive management team. And of course, Josh D'Amaro, previous president of Walt Disney World Resort and Disney CSO, has been promoted to chairman of Walt Disney Parks, Resorts and Experiences and Consumer Products. Now, this is, I feel like, a very long time coming for Mr. Josh D'Amaro. I think even on the episode, previous episodes before, we've sort of pitched Mr. D'Amaro as a great replacement for Bob Chapek in lieu of him becoming CEO. Oh, they still need a chief president of the Parks, Resorts and Experiences. So, yeah, I guess we can sort of pause right there because, like I said, Mr. Josh D'Amaro, I think he's a very beloved figure, not just with sort of us theme park fans, but in the theme park, like for the cast members working there as well. I feel like he has a real connection to the cast members. But Mr. Rob, what are your initial thoughts here on Josh D'Amaro? I'm very pleased about this. Josh D'Amaro being named chairman of the Walt Disney Parks, Resorts, and Experiences and Consumer Products.
I mean, this is exciting. I think, like you said, we were kind of all expecting something to happen once Chapek got bumped up to CEO. I'd almost wonder if Josh moving to Disney World was just prep for this move, right?
Yeah.
Because while the Chapek news was really a surprise for all of us, I imagine it wasn't internally for the top leadership. There must have been some planning going on. So I wonder if they thought, let's bring Josh to Disney World, get him up to speed on Disney World, because soon he's going to have all of the parks. But I'm excited to see what comes of this, because yeah, like just hearing all of the stories from when he first moved over to Disney World, because I wasn't very familiar with him before that, it sounds like he was really beloved and kind of has this emphasis. I know within the first few weeks at Disney World, he put out this article about, putting emphasis on the cast member experience and how yes, it's all about the guests, but to give guests that great experience, you need cast members who are also having a great experience. And so I think that's a very healthy way to look at things, and I'm excited to see how that manifests now that he's running, that whole division.
Yeah, and Mr. Jeremy, what are your thoughts on Mr. Josh D'Amaro becoming the new chairman of this is a mouthful, Walt Disney Parks, Resorts, Experiences, and Consumer Products?
I agree. I think it's an excellent choice. It's an incredibly smart choice too, and I think it proves that they have actually learned lessons in the past about what managers and executives need to be in place for when the company goes through an economic crisis. So I think Josh is going to be really good at taking care of the people who work under him, and I mean all the way down to the cast members. And I think he's also going to be able to, he's a fan with guests as well, so he's going to be able to offer the best guest experience possible. He's also going to be able to mitigate the damage with a smile on his face. But I also think he's still going to care about quality and make sure the parks don't turn into parks circa 2001, So I think it's a very smart choice, and it's very rare to find a great manager anywhere. So it's really exciting, especially for the prospect of what happens when Chapek retires down the line. I'm sure he'll be a front runner for who becomes CEO, and that's a promising future for the company, if you ask me.
Yeah, Mr. Josh D'Amaro, new CEO of the Walt Disney Company. That has a very nice ring to it. I would be excited to see that in the future. But of course, moving on, Jeff Vail, previous president of Disney Signature Experiences, has been named the new president of Walt Disney World Resort in Josh D'Amaro's place. How long was Josh D'Amaro the president of Walt Disney World? I feel like it was only a few months at this point. It feels like maybe not even a year. I can't remember off the top of my head.
It was definitely less than a year. It was a short amount of time.
Well, again, that is, I mean, I wouldn't be able to put myself in his shoes just to think of moving from such a big position to even a bigger position. Again, we're moving on from Josh D'Amaro for now, but there are other people that we need to highlight as well. Rebecca Campbell, previous president of the Disneyland Resort, has been promoted to chairman, Walt Disney Direct to Consumer, to replace Kevin Meyer. I believe that is sort of the section of the company that handles Disney Plus and their sort of direct-to-consumer streaming stuff. Big congrats to Rebecca Campbell as well. Yeah, and of course, Kevin Mayer has left Disney and accepted the job as CEO of TikTok. So that is not something I expected, but good for Mr. Mayer. Apparently, he does depart the company on good terms. But yeah, the CEO of TikTok, I guess it sort of makes sense if he came from the direct-to-consumer area of the company moving to. But yeah, big congrats to Mr. Mayer. I'm sure that's a big upgrade for him as well. And Campbell's successor is Kevin Potrock. I hope I pronounced that right. I apologize. Formerly Disney's president of consumer products. And other moves in the management team include Kareem Daniel moving to the role of president of consumer products, games, and publishing, and guys, these last names. Thomas Mazzollum. There it is. Thomas Mazzollum moving to the role of president of Disney Signature Experiences. Now, we already touched on Mr. Josh D'Amaro, but what do you guys think of the other new management leaders? Rebecca Campbell, of course, moving to direct-to-consumer. Jeff Vail has been named the president of Walt Disney World. Jeremy, let's go ahead and start with you here. What are your thoughts on all of these other moves that the company has been making this past week?
I mean, it's sort of like time will tell. I think it's always a really kind of exciting area whenever there's a sort of corporate shakeup. executive shakeup in any company, but especially Disney. So, and I think it's exciting because, we've had the sort of Bob Iger era. I mean, of course, he's still there. The era that we've been in for so long that it's exciting to see how the company, I don't want to say rebrands itself, but strengthens its identity moving forward with this new team in a post-COVID world.
Sure.
So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, we will see. Mr. Rob, what are your thoughts on all these other moves in the management team?
I mean, there are certainly names that I'm excited about. Disney for Vail to move to Disney World. I went on a Disney cruise last year, and it was no doubt it was like the best Disney experience I've ever had. So the idea that Vail is moving over to Disney World, that gets me excited. But I agree, it's going to take some time before we see any of this manifest in changes to the parks, especially because right now Disney's playing the game of reacting rather than acting with the state of the world right now. And then on top of that, you have to suss out how much of their leadership style can actually turn into something when at the end of the day they are still answering to higher ups who will in some cases mandate things. So I'm very fascinated with how this is all playing out, but I think it's going to be a while before we start to notice like a market difference in the parks.
Yeah, and again, I do send all the best wishes to everybody, especially, guys, Josh D'Amaro, of course, is a fan favorite. Big kudos to him. Very excited. But we do have a voicemail that we would like to get to here. I believe this is from Mr. Avery, and this is in regards to the change up in the management position. So let's go ahead and hear what Mr. Avery has to say here.
I think
he's quiet again.
Kudos to Chapek for Chapstick for upgrading Josh to this position. It is great for him. I'm all in favor of it. It was a no-brainer decision to upgrade Josh to chairman. He's perfect for the role. There's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow in the we trust.
Guys, did we just come up with a brand new term here? A great, big, beautiful tomorrow? Avery, thank you for that. That was amazing. Well, anyways, I'm trying to recover from the shock of how great that was, but thank you, Mr. Avery, for that lovely voicemail. And again, 575-386-5814 if you'd also like to leave your voicemail on any of the thoughts or any of the topics that we are talking about today. And unless you guys have any concluding thoughts on this topic, I think it might be time to move on to something else. Do you guys have anything you'd like to add on here?
TikTok? All right.
TikTok.
I guess we'll see. I mean, it's certainly popular. I can see why he did it, but that'll be interesting 5 years from now.
It was interesting because wasn't there some speculation and rumor that he was being considered for like CEO of the entire company? Yeah, it's so weird.
That's why I get it, because in that world it's like, all right, well, if Chapek got it, then his next opening as CEO, assuming he gets that over tomorrow, that's still years and years away. So I could see why this is a big step up for him to be the CEO of a company that is obviously hugely popular right now. Will time be kind to that? We'll see, but best of luck to him.
Yeah.
And another thing, and one last thing about tomorrow is something that is also very promising, is that he's sort of becoming a face to the company, which I think is extremely important when you're in a leadership position in the Walt Disney Company. So if he were to become CEO 15 or so years down the line, that would be pretty good, I think.
Yeah, like I mentioned, he does have a very great public image, not just with the fans, but with the cast members as well. So very excited to see where his journey takes him. But someone said in chat, Kevin Meyer was in the running for the job that Josh got, so that might be why he left. I don't know if that's 100% confirmed or not, but that may be something to sort of add there in the thought tunnel there for you guys. But anyways, I do feel like that is time to move on to our second topic of the day, and that, of course, is the weekly COVID news rundown. So let's go ahead and get right into this.
This week on Matterhorn Monday, Matt and company continue their reports and discussions on COVID-19 and its impact on the Disney company around the world.
Great.
Best music ever. Okay.
Gotta love
I don't
it.
know why I say that every week.
Well, in case you guys are new and don't know how this segment goes down, I'll be listing off some headlines that have sort of appeared throughout this week that relate to the Disney company as a whole in regards to the whole, pandemic that's going on. And then we'll highlight one specific article here that we will delve deeper into. And it's a great article that I'm really excited to get into, a great discussion here. But for our first headline here, Disney parks could burn through $27 million a day amid the COVID-19 pandemic, and analysts warn, and that is from the OC Register. And of course, all these links will be down in the description below if you guys would like to read any further into any of the topics that we're talking about. Second headline here, Walt Disney World Resort and Disneyland Resort Guest Relations releases a statement regarding the ongoing closures, renovations, modifications, and more from Walt Disney World News Today. Third topic here, Shanghai Disneyland resumes stage shows after a successful post-COVID reopening. So that's some good news out there in the Shanghai Disneyland world. And for our fourth topic here, quote, I can't get any help. Disney World staff goes weeks without unemployment benefits, from The Guardian. That is a very interesting read if you guys are into that. So link will be in the description as well. And for our fifth headline here, Hong Kong Disneyland is reportedly testing soft reopening with cast members through May 21st. I assume this is in response to the positive reaction that Shanghai has gotten from their reopening. Like we just mentioned, stage shows are coming back to Shanghai, so that might be a signal for Hong Kong to step on the gas and get that park back open. We'll see how that goes in the future. And for our sixth headline here, Walt Disney World Resort to submit reopening plans next week, which is actually, I believe, this week once this episode drops. So we'll be discussing that once that actually happens, and that is according to Orange County Mayor from Walt Disney World News Today. And finally, Disneyland Resort releases an update regarding reopening and resort operations. No reopening date at this time. It is kind of strange to me how we've only been hearing reopening dates, when it from Walt Disney World, and of course I think Universal Studios Florida, Orlando, released their sort of plan on how they're going to be reopening their parks. So yeah, we've been waiting for Disneyland to release their sort of statement on when Disneyland will reopen, but yeah, no reopening date at this time. Only Walt Disney World Resort is what we've been hearing about. But for our final headline here that I'm very excited to get into. This is, Can Disney Help Americans Fall in Love with Science Again? This is a great piece from the OC Register. You guys know how we feel about the OC Register here, but can Disney help Americans fall in love with science again? I would highly recommend reading in depth this article. We will be sort of having a discussion here with this. So, Mr. Jeremy, what are your thoughts here on this article from Can Disney Help Americans Fall in Love with Science Again? I'm excited to get into this.
Well, I think it's really interesting, and something that I talk about constantly on this show is how I think they can, they just have to do it in new ways. But the article was sort of a very sort of general summation of those points. I think they could have done a better job at running through even more of the active history of, especially in terms of the theme parks. Of course, they do mention the space documentary, the Great Space Documentaries, directed by the great Ward Kimball in the 50s. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure the conversation will go from here. In a general sense, I do believe that Disney can. Of course, one of the interesting questions in the article that is presented is, wow, I just lost my train of thought again, is more so what the social responsibility and obligation that a company with that vast amount of technology, money, and resources, why aren't they leading the charge like they used to be on promoting future technologies that will better society? Not just that, but Disney, it was a good way of making the public today we're kind of scared of like radical rebuilding of our infrastructure, rebuilding our cities for the 21st century. As we think about climate change, of course, now we're thinking about public health because of this. And Disney in the mid 20th century was really good at getting the public excited about radical changes to infrastructure, radical changes to transportation, to energy consumption. And I think we worry about solutions to problems that we face today. And I think Disney has a very rich history of making people less scared about the problems and less scared about the solutions. Because today we seem to be scared about the solutions, because, change is very scary. And I think Disney has a good history of making sure people are well informed about the possibilities of what radical change in our infrastructure can bring. So, we can kind of see where they veered away from that sort of branding. I always make the argument Disney's rebranded themselves to the public a million times without the public noticing, which is actually like the best way to go about rebranding. So it's interesting, and I think we're starting to ask these questions again, especially now that we're going through a crisis. So it's interesting, but I can't wait to hear what Rob thinks about this as well.
It's a very exciting prospect because I'm kind of in the same boat of I think they have the ability to, and I certainly hope that they find a way to. I think the greater question that comes up with something like this is how can they do it in a way that gels with the way the public's tastes in entertainment have changed over the years? Because, I think if we look back at Disney's history and how they've gotten people excited about the future and technology, it was at a time where, and this goes to what you were saying about people being afraid of solutions. This was at a time where people were excited about the future and, they looked at it as this promising, optimistic, tomorrow that would, not just impact their children or their grandchildren's lives, but impact their lives directly. You look at things like, the House of the Future, and it wasn't posed as this is what people are going to be living in 100 years from now. This is what you could be living in. And today technology moves so quickly, it becomes harder to make that pitch of, this could be impacting your life, because by the time they, pitch it and build it and install it, it might be outdated, or, it might be just not as exciting anymore. And so I think what Disney needs to do, if they want to, take that responsibility and they want to kind of get people excited with science, is find a new middle ground of how far into the future they can look so that it's more practical for them to achieve it in the parks, but also in a way that's a little bit more entertaining to today's taste. I wonder if park guests, your average park guest, maybe not even the Disney enthusiasts, how much they need to be tricked into learning almost, or find a fun angle to it. It's a weird thought that keeps popping into my head, but I look at a game like Minecraft and how that has taught a lot of young people about computer science through just things like redstone in that game. And so does interactivity play into it? Should Disney be leaning more into games or interactive experiences at the parks that can engage younger people a little bit better? And will they do it? I don't know, but I certainly hope they do. And I think they have the ability to. And I think that would be a perfect thing that they could have included in the new Epcot in some form or another, just kind of upgrade the whole concept of looking optimistically at the future.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think the aim does have to change. And I think because technology, like every day, convenience technology changes every few months. I don't think that can be the angle anymore, like computers and cell phones, and I don't think that's what's exciting about the future anyway. And I think a lot of the ideas that Walt was starting to experiment with and research in the 60s is still considered pretty radical today. We're having conversations today in this country about totally transforming our transportation, and we're having conversations about rebuilding our cities in very similar ways that was demonstrated in those sort of blue sky concepts for Epcot, the city. So it's really interesting to me. I think this is a part of Disney's legacy, and I'd like to see how they can really sort of rebrand that image and how they can implement that. I'd like to see them implement that into Epcot as well, Rob. I agree. And I do think it would have to be from a new angle. I'm sure you and I would disagree about whether that includes IPs or not, but I'm glad that we agree that Epcot can be used as a source to engage the public, especially the young public, on sort of the idea of tomorrow and how tomorrow is not a fantasy. Tomorrow is like tomorrow. It actually comes. So, and how the solutions can be exciting and not scary, you know? Oh, yeah.
At the end, tomorrow's coming one way or another, so all the more reason to make it a better tomorrow as opposed to just letting the status quo continue. Or, I almost wonder if there's value, because I think optimism is a really powerful force, especially the way Disney can, deliver on it. Thinking back to rides like Horizons, where that resonated with people for so many years and decades to today, thinking about the future, is it worth, I'd love to see a return to that idea of, we're going to show you what we think the future could be like. And there's obviously, you change how you're portraying that future, because again, you don't want to make promises that are already going to be outdated. Maybe you need to pivot there, but to cement it in the idea that it's going to be a nice, optimistic future. And yeah, there might be problems, but we're going to overcome them together. And we're going to just give you this future. And, I don't know if rides today do that as much, but I think that could be really powerful, because sure, there'll be some cynicism and people will, obviously they'll pull any scene out of something like that and they could mock it and point out like all the flaws, but I think the optimism will still shine through that. And you see the cool elements and you go, yeah, you know what, that could be something that's a part of my life one day. And that's really awesome. And if it can inspire somebody to look into it more or learn about it or even get into that field, then it's done its job.
Absolutely agree. Yeah.
Yeah, very well said. And I do also agree that I do feel like a lot of this this problem, at least when it comes to like Epcot and Tomorrowland, where the future is always changing so very quickly. We've seen like one of you guys mentioned the House of Tomorrow. I think Rob mentioned that in Tomorrowland. That became very outdated.
House of the Future, man.
House of the
Come
Future.
on.
Guys, I'm the host here. I should know this, but House of the Future, you guys, that became very outdated very quickly. And of course, you see things like Innoventions, of course, is like the main standout in at least the Disneyland version of Innoventions, where that just sort of fizzled out and became nothing. So I do feel like Disney could. It's just very difficult, like you guys mentioned, when it comes to how technology is always developing. Like just a few, maybe like a decade ago, we were all hyping up VR, and now it feels like almost everybody has like at least some sort of VR headset or like a VR capable phone in their pocket. But yeah, we do have a voicemail here that I'd like to get to from Mr. T. Will. So let's go ahead and see what Mr. T. Will has to say to add to the conversation.
When it comes to Disney becoming a leader for, promoting new technologies and new ways of thinking, like in the Walt days, I think that comes to a cultural shift when it comes in terms of entertainment and when it comes to entertainment companies and conglomerates. I think also it just happened to be that Walt may have been too unique for his own good in the structure of a media empire. In that sense, I mean, it's great that we had him, and I'm really appreciative of what he did. But, remember, Epcot fell apart right after he died. And I think also people still have a animosity towards corporations and corporate influence and power and so forth. So I think even if they were to be people to lead that charge, I think they would still get a lot of pushback and animosity because the climate of corporate influence and media and entertainment companies getting into building a new future is still seen, I would say, is still looked down upon and really seen suspiciously. And also just the executives at Disney have shown that they don't want to really try it. They just want to play it safe. Get them what keeps them in the black and keeps them in good PR. I think they will always lean towards and not do something bold and brash like I'm going to build Disneyland, or I'm going to do monorails. We're going to do, a city of the future. That stuff, I think, still scares them. And so I don't, even though we would want them to do that, I think the cultural look towards corporations, and the boldness of imagination and kind of courageousness that Walt had still doesn't exist in the company, I don't think, at least in the higher ups.
Yeah, very great voicemail from Mr. T. Will. Do you guys have anything you'd like to sort of add on to that before we continue the discussion?
I think there's a great point to that, because I do think the animosity towards corporations is a big problem, because, Disney isn't a consumer electronic company. So in order for them to highlight elements of the future that might impact our day to day, you need those companies. And yet, if you have an attraction that's sponsored by Amazon, how many people are truly going to trust this optimistic vision of the future, right? Like, and it's not an unfounded, cynicism towards those companies. So it's tough, because I think if you look at Disney in the 50s and the 60s, they were in a much better position to be leaders in this, whereas now I think they're just a very influential cog, for sure, but still a cog in a bigger machine that, there are going to be things they can't control, which is like, how much does the general public trust technology today,
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. And it actually, I think there would be an opportunity to totally sort of restructure the format. At the time, corporate sponsorship was different than it appears to be today. Today, it's, it feels like more of an endorsement. We're also more skeptical of large corporations as well, including Disney. But the thing is, the thing about changing tastes in entertainment and how that would need to be considered is that Disney, in terms of the entertainment industry, Disney really leads the way now more than ever in terms of entertainment content and also the technology to deliver it. And I think that if they led by example, people would follow. And I think that's the real barrier to entry with Disney, not necessarily just the properties that they own, is that they are inventors too. And that's such a rich part of their legacy that I think it should be brought out more, especially today.
I'd agree with that. And I think it's one of the main reasons why I'm really kind of bummed at Disney's timidness when it comes to interactive entertainment, because that's one field where I do feel like they're way, way behind, and there are going to be entire generations of kids. And, to them, their day-to-day is their entertainment comes in the form of video games. Like, they're not watching movies or even going to theme parks as much. They're playing games. And I think Disney's got an opportunity there, especially if they do, people are going to debate one way or another, if they do leverage the properties they own to, once again, kind of trick people into learning a little bit through it. But the way they are right now is, I don't know if it was because ESPN was such an issue for them, but they just seem to always, lean back when it came to video games. And that was such a shame, because I think that's a really powerful tool that they could be using to push, a love of science, technology, everything.
Yeah, and I think they've been sort of slowly trying to implement it in kind of like all the kind of weird ways that kind of makes it come off as if it's not actually a good idea to pursue. So I do think there's a future in more interactivity in the parks. I think also there's probably a lot of Imagineers that really want to take the time to consider how it can be integrated into narrative, into story, into theme and ideas. So hopefully they step on the gas with that, because if they can do it right and they can do it well, it would be pretty exciting.
Yeah, and there are some quotes that I would also like to highlight from this specific article. And again, this is a really great article if you guys are interested in checking it out. Let's see. Quote, Disney's history with big or high tech begins with Walt himself, who surrounded himself with tech geeks who loved to hack new stuff for the company to use in its storytelling. And continuing on here, Walt's infectious enthusiasm for technology and the science behind it encouraged a generation of Americans to respect and admire science. We could use another Walt Disney to help Americans do that today. I'd like to sort of pause right there, because that quote mentioned, of course, Walt was the front runner when it came to this kind of stuff, especially with the Disneyland TV show. I'd like to ask the question, who would be the new face of this new maybe promotion of science and education for the Walt Disney Company? Because of course back then we had Walt, who is so obviously very passionate about what he was talking about. Of course, Jeremy mentioned the documentaries. Man on the Moon, I think, was one of them, directed by Ward Kimball. And of course, just even the technology that he pioneered for the parks. You have animatronics, audio animatronics, and I think the article also mentioned things like the multiplane camera as well as that. Walt was so very obviously, in love with that kind of progression of technology that he, of course, was chosen as to be the spokesperson for that. So this is a difficult question, I think, but who would you guys propose to be, or maybe just like a general idea, who would you guys want to be the new face of this sort of progression when it comes to the Disney Company promoting, more education, more science in the parks, just that in general?
That is a tough question.
I mean, my number one would, of course, be Mickey Mouse, but...
It's a tough question because in the sort of years that they've rebranded themselves, and especially the way that Iger sort of rebranded the company, it's sort of an element of the company that they've sort of left to history.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something they sort of actively kept pursuing. So it's tough. I do think I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it's on the company's list of things to do.
Yeah, I think honestly they would have to go outside of the company, and they would have to find a spokesperson to be that branch of their image. And even then, that's still a tough question, because who are you're looking for somebody who's a good presenter, a good personality, also has some involvement in like the science or engineering community, and like who is that person? I don't even know. And if you're trying to appeal to younger audiences with that, do you find like a really great science YouTube channel and get a personality from that, or is it somebody from television? It's a tough one.
It's tough, and it also goes back to, and you can talk to a lot of the surviving original Imagineers today, it's just Walt. There's only one Walt.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, when are you going to have a figure like that? There will be another Walt in history down the line. But I mean, it's a rare thing when you get a figure like that.
Yeah.
So who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, and I'd also like to pose this question, not to just you two, but to everybody watching in the comments down below in the chat. Maybe if you guys would like to call in, leave a voicemail, 575-386-5814. But Mark TASG Vlogs did say possibly Jon Favreau, and the folks at Industrial Light and Magic could be
not bad
an option.
Actually.
Of course, Jon Favreau, most recently known for the technology that he helped pioneer for The Mandalorian. I don't know if you guys have seen that sort of behind the scenes documentary with like the screens.
Fantastic.
Yeah, really great stuff. He also mentioned Elon Musk. I'm not really sure about Elon Musk nowadays. He's sort of been teetering on the, but
he's a great example of why it's such a difficult question.
Sure,
because
right.
in today's world more than ever too, is that figure going to still be favorable in the public eye 2, 3, 5 years down the line?
Uh-huh.
It is a very tough question, but I'd like to leave on this voicemail here from Mr. Vetter, who is in chat. Let's go ahead and hear what he has to say about the topic.
Hey guys, it's Vetter. I want to say, hey Rob, big fan. I just want to say that if Walt Disney would have not have died, the parks would have been a lot more better. Epcot would have been something way different than what we got. And Tomorrowland would have felt like tomorrow. Just want to say thank you guys. And bye.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vetter, for that brief but great voicemail. Do you guys have any little brief thoughts you'd like to say about that?
I mean, it's difficult. I mean, it's so everyone likes to play the, what would Walt do today, or even
I feel like we should all have that like
and
tattooed on us at this point. That phrase.
It's difficult to know, but I do think we know enough about him to be able to come up with some speculative ideas. I will say this: I would have loved to have seen how he would have perceived and taken farther those early early computing, like consumer computers, in stuff like that. And I would be so curious to see how he would look at the technology we have today in terms of consumer technology and be able to find better ways of using it, I think. So yeah, it would be interesting, and how he would implement that into what he does as a entertainer or a producer of entertainment. So yeah, that's the only thing I can say about it. I'm sure he'd be excited about all the technology we have today, and I'm sure he'd be curious about all of the problems that we face today, especially in terms of climate change. Because when you look at what he was interested in experimenting with back in the 60s, I mean, renewable energy. I mean, and that's still controversial today. So can you imagine if he was around to really kind of curate a plan to make the public excited about those solutions as opposed to scared of them? So it's interesting. It's interesting.
Absolutely. And also, thank you, Vetter. I mean, it's one of those games you can never. I'm just very fascinated with how the world would have reacted, more so than how Walt would have reacted in a world past his death. How the world would have reacted to him, because obviously,
very true.
the late '60s, early '70s was a very volatile time for American culture and how things evolved. And would he have had imposing force on how that evolved? Would we have been as untrusting of companies if he was still around, or would he just be part of another company that we as a nation started to lose trust in? I don't know the answer. I guess nobody will, but it's always fascinating to think of. But I agree, it would be interesting to see how he tackles technology today. I don't think his optimism would have died at all.
No.
The reception might have changed, but yeah, he definitely would have been all in on this stuff.
Yeah, and I guess I spoke too soon. We do have one last final voicemail here on this subject from Mr. Jared in chat. So let's go ahead and hear what Mr. Jared has to say about this topic.
Hey, this is Jared, talking about just my thoughts. I definitely think the company has a very big almost liability to, well, not liability, but they definitely should be pursuing not edutainment, but more of that prospect of the future, much more. It's been in their DNA from the start, I believe, because Walt was already always doing new technologies, and I definitely think they, as much as I don't like IPs in the parks, if it's what gets the people in, if it's the barrier for what can be built and what can't be built, I would say at least use them to make something that's interesting and good, and that fits. I would definitely be very happy to see more of that sort of edutainment style stuff in the parks. And I would also love to see the parks utilize that new technology to not only showcase, like, hey, this is what the future's going to be like, but use it within the rides and attractions to help make a more cohesive and more just better narrative by immersing the audience into the attraction more. I would love to see that. So almost using, hey, here's this cool new technology, and here's an example of us using it to tell this great story and narrative. I would love to see that. Yeah, I definitely would love to see a return to like that sort of event.
I think he muffled his mic there.
Big budget attractions about new technologies and worry about them getting outdated. I think they should just do something like Interventions. Like you just have very small exhibits built on a very small budget showcasing these new technologies that you can rotate out constantly, almost like a permanent CES in the parks. I think that would definitely fit in, and I think it's definitely should be done, and it's within the company's, I think, best interest to push that new stuff and get the new audiences excited for the future. And on a side note, Rob, I've been a huge fan of your content.
If it weren't for your videos, I probably would not be as big of a Disney fan as I am right now. So I just want to thank you for that, and have a great, big, beautiful tomorrow. Bye.
Alrighty.
You hear that, Bob Chapek? Do I get a check or something?
Oh my gosh. Guys, special guest Bob Chapek. He's walking in.
That'd be great.
Well, that was a great voicemail.
Great points there.
Yeah.
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 Who would like to tackle
that? I will say, I always I never find edutainment quite the right word. I don't think Epcot Center is like edutainment. I consider edutainment to be like Jumpstart Third Grade on CD-ROM in like the late 90s.
Sure.
You know, that's edutainment, and you know, a great source of my nostalgia. But I don't think like Epcot Center is so much grander, and I think actually, Jared, I don't know if something like Innoventions is the right way. It's one way to go about it. It made sense in Communicore when it was like introducing computers as a consumer product. And then I think when we got to like the 90s and you'd go in Innoventions and there was like a TiVo demonstration, it just totally became outdated immediately. I think actually Disney's better at communicating more of a pathos to the sort of general philosophy of what all of the new things that we can make will bring for the future, which is why Horizons is something we look back at as a masterpiece, you know, because it captured an idea of the future as opposed to being like, here's a computer, you know. So I don't know.
In addition to that, like I agree with a lot of that, and I think if you just look at the state today of the way technology is rolled out, it's showing that even outside of the parks, the idea of something like a CES is just like on the decline. I mean, when do we learn about the new Apple phone? Through Apple's own presentation, right?
Yeah.
And the video game conferences are kind of falling apart. E3's kind of slimming down. So I think we've reached a point where the technology, surprisingly enough, has allowed us to not need those sort of ways to introduce new technology. But I also think if Disney is this media empire and they have all these branches of communicating with people, that in itself can be a tool to help teach, because you look at a ride like Rise of the Resistance, and I think it's a masterpiece of an attraction, but obviously there's nothing in there that is inherently going to get you excited about science or technology or the future. It's just a really great ride. But, you know, you have something like Disney Plus. If they continue the Imagineering story where each episode, you know, drills in on just one technology and teaches you about, you know, the technology, the physics, the idea behind it, you know, it's almost like taking that entertainment and using it as bait to learn more about it. All right. Like just to get behind all of it. And I think with the series itself, you're already seeing Disney loosen up a little bit about that idea of, you know, they don't want to see behind the magic. They want to preserve the illusion. They're obviously okay with showing some stuff. So if they leaned into that more too and gave you great experiences that utilize technology and science, and then on the side teach you about it, you know, and use that enjoyment of the ride as sort of like an anchor, I think that could also be really helpful.
Yeah.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we've all made some very great points, and I think, guys, don't be surprised if by next episode we come to you saying that, you know, maybe the Walt Disney Company reached out to all three of us to help pioneer this. Just kidding. But wouldn't that be
I'd be like,
something?
don't take Matt.
Leave me behind. Just take these two.
He doesn't know how to pronounce words.
It's true. They'll have to provide a dictionary or a thesaurus if I get included. But anyways, great discussion. I'm really glad we picked this topic. So thank you to everybody who called in as well. If you guys would still like to voice your opinions, the number is 575-386-5814. But I think on that note, it's been a while, you guys, since we've heard from Puckermint and the liveplace.com.
Oh, wow,
so,
I forgot about crazy.
Yeah,
I forgot about the
guys. Before we continue on into our final topic, which is of course Attraction Retrospective, let's go ahead and take a brief moment of pause to hear from the show's sponsors. If you guys are wondering where you can find even more family-friendly live streams just like this one, head on over to theliveplace.com. The Live Place is your headquarters for great family-friendly live streams. They cover anything from Disney to other vacation spots, various variety shows, and have some amazing streamers like Resort TV 1 and myself. Also, be sure to check out puckermint.com, where you can find amazing pins and stickers. Puckermint is based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, just a few hours from where I live. And since I'm a big believer in supporting local artists, we decided to partner up. Be sure to use the coupon code down below when you make your next order. Again, that's puckermint.com and puckermint on Instagram. All right, and we're back, everybody. Woohoo! Back to the show. Okay, well, yeah, we've had some great discussions thus forth, but I think it's time to continue on with some even greater discussions, because it's time for this episode's Attraction Retrospective. And Mr. Rob, why don't you go ahead and unveil which attraction you decided for all of us to retrospect on in today's episode?
So when people think of Tomorrowland, they think of one iconic attraction, and it is one that I think has instilled itself not only in Disney fandom, but in the minds of Americans everywhere when it comes to sci-fi and the future, and that is Delta Dream Flight. The follow-up to if you had wings, and the predecessor to Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin. It's it's I
embedded in the American psyche.
It's just nobody can forget Delta Dream Flight. It's just, look at that sign. It's just
beautiful. Wow,
it's perfect.
All right. Well, of course, like Rob said, Delta Dream Flight, defunct attraction in the Magic Kingdom's Tomorrowland, of course, opened June 23rd of 1989. But Mr. Rob, since this is your pick for the Attraction Retrospective, what made you pick this attraction for us to discuss about out of all the other rides that you could have chose from?
It's weird. It's strange because on paper it's not the kind of ride I would really love, but it's pure nostalgia. Like, I grew up riding Dream Flight. I was around for If You Had Wings, but I was way too young to remember it. So like Dream Flight's the one I really remember, and I kind of appreciate it for being almost like a caricature of sponsored theme park attractions. You know what I mean? It is the most extreme version of it. Back to its history of, this was the free ride during the ticketed system, right? Well, I mean, it wasn't Delta Dream Flight at this point, but it was so sponsored that it was basically free because you were riding a commercial. And I don't know, there's something about that I appreciate and enjoy, and something about the music's really burned into my brain. And there's this great bit at the end where it's basically similar to Horizons. You're moving, but you're watching a projected screen as you fly through this futuristic city that looks like a school binder from the 1990s. It's just like all shapes. And I think that plays a little bit of a part of me growing up to love the future in sci-fi, is that weird depiction of the future. So I kind of I think all those things together made me really want to talk about it.
Yeah, of course. I always consider If You Had Wings and Dream Flight to be a predecessor to World of Motion. Especially with that sort of finale, and also the idea of like traveling and stuff like that. I don't know why, because it's not about it's sponsored by transportation. But I'm just curious. So why so specifically Dream Flight? By the way, I too find it to be like, that's a perfect way to describe it, a caricature of sponsored attractions. A lyric that makes me laugh every time I hear it is "Delta welcomes you back from your dream flight." It's so funny. It's so funny.
It's perfect. It's what it's what other people I think would imagine when they think about like, sponsorships. And yet at the same time, if you look at the ride and you go through it and like watch a ride through, if you've never been on it before, yes, it was smaller in scope than, say, a World of Motion or a Horizons, obviously, but like it was still a Disney attraction. They still committed to real life sets and music that was a bit of an earworm and just an experience that was completely memorable. And even everything from the queue to the ride to afterwards, just it still had the quality of a Disney attraction. Sure, it was scaled down, but it didn't fully feel like they were just, I don't know, phoning it in just to get a ride done. And I think that stuck with me a lot. I loved seeing all the interiors. Like, you go through the plane. I thought it was kind of a very creative way to show flight, and in a very, to what you said with World of Motion and Horizons a bit. You're seeing the beginning of flight. You're seeing flight as it is today, and then you're seeing the supposed future of flight. And so it still has that Disney storytelling to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and well, you sort of touched on your history with this attraction. What makes this attraction so special to you? Of course, you mentioned that you grew up riding the ride, but just if you can maybe further elaborate on that.
Sure. I think I have fond memories of not only riding it, but riding it with my parents. And it was the kind of thing where, just to what I talked about, whereas kind of that full range of Disney storytelling, I remember that full range of emotion of seeing early flight, especially there's a part of the montage of early flight where it's like one of those, stunt pilots who's strapped to the top of a biplane and nobody's flying it. And I was always just like, wow, that's how people flew back then. That's so crazy. To, showing planes in the 50s and 60s to where my parents would go, oh yeah, that's kind of what it looked like back then. And so there's that kind of generational connection to then seeing that futuristic flying around a sci-fi city and going, oh, the future's going to be great. Like, it just emotionally hit on every beat for me. And then the song was just designed to be like a commercial song. So I, remember the music to this day. And so I think all of those things considered, and the fact that it just never really had a long line meant we probably rode it way more than some of the more popular attractions when we were down. And I think that altogether just gave me really fond memories of it. Most importantly, it was gone before I was old enough to ride it and be cynical about it. I think that's the most important part.
Of course.
Yeah, so like all of the kind of like clear like flaws with it are just like, oh, I missed that. It was so quirky.
Exactly.
And, like, so funny.
It's all gone. Had it stuck around as long as, say, the Maelstrom, I don't know how I would have reacted to it, but,
Right. Yeah, but that's just like, if I went on Maelstrom, like if Maelstrom just opened, like if Maelstrom opened yesterday and I went on it for the first time, I'm sure I'd be like, that wasn't the best representation of Norwegian history or culture. But because it is literally one of the first rides I ever went on when I first went to Disney World, I have such, and I feel like this is why Maelstrom has such a following in its extinct life, is because it's like, wait a minute, I grew up with that ride. I miss it, So, yeah.
Well, before we continue on here, we do have a voicemail from Mr. Avery that I'm excited to get into, and this is about the attraction, of course. So let's go ahead and take a listen here.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
If you had wings, had wings.
It's gonna sing the whole thing.
Before it was raised out the dream fight, that's a earworm. Like, I like Delta Dream Flight. I like If You Had Wings. But honestly, I prefer Buzz Lightyear that's there right now. Like, it's so much fun to try to get the top score and become the galactic hero and get your precious, your glorious galactic hero sticker. For me, I prefer that over Delta Dream Flight, but I'm sure I'm not alone. But I just prefer Buzz Lightyear over Dream Flight. I will say Dream Flight is still great. I think for If You Had Wings, both great attractions. But for me personally, I like Buzz Lightyear. Maybe because I watched Buzz Lightyear's show on Disney, and I just like Buzz Lightyear in general. And it's still a great ride. Also, Delta welcomes you back from Dream Flight, the Fire Dream Flight.
Oh my gosh.
Such a funny
Want
lyric.
to
Can't
take
stand
a
it.
dream flight, the ocean is far in sight.
Well, Avery should just sing every single theme song from every single attraction going forward. That was amazing. Thank you, Avery.
I do have a confession to make. I was in the shower this morning, and I did sing "If You Had Wings" in the shower this morning.
There it is.
Which I
Consensus.
love. I prefer that song. That song is so good. I love it, and all the different variations of it. It's great. So,
Well, yeah, I think we should sort of transition this topic to the attraction that replaced it, because for one, I've done very little research. I think I did research for this attraction for when we did the Historyland episode of Buzz Lightyear, and that was a long time ago. Space Ranger Spin.
yeah, I didn't even write that one.
Yeah, no, Jeremy, that was way before Jeremy's time, so that was a long time ago, but I believe this attraction was manufactured by Aero Development, which sort of threw me off guard when I heard that, because, of course, Aero Development. But, this attraction also did feature the Omnimover ride system, but it was, of course, replaced by the Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin. Love it or hate it. I guess I've gone on record by saying I'm not the biggest fan of these both versions of the Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin Astro Blasters attractions, but Mr. Rob, I'm sure you were absolutely devastated when you heard the news. You maybe opened the newspaper on that day, and you read that Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin would be replacing Delta Dreamflight. What are your thoughts, just retrospecting, on Buzz Lightyear as a replacement for Delta Dreamflight?
I mean, when it happened, I was psyched because I love video games too, and so the interactivity of Buzz really appealed to me, and I loved Toy Story at the time. I think over the years I'd come to not love the idea of Toy Story in Tomorrowland.
Yeah.
And definitely from a technological perspective, it's really due for at least an upgrade, if not to be replaced with something else.
Sure,
Midway Mania's kind of made it obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I really dug it. I'm a big fan of vibrant colors, and this is a super colorful attraction. And I love all things sci-fi, so it still held me over. And even just recently, because I'm a local down in Florida now, and so I've been able to go on it enough that I now can finally max out the score. So I feel like now it's okay to replace. Before it wasn't, because I had never done it. But now that I've hit that benchmark, now Disney can go forward and do whatever they need to with that space. But I've never been love it or hate it. It's been very lukewarm of just it's entertaining. It's not as much as I love Dreamflight, I'm not going to pretend it was a gem that needed to stick around. So I'm ready for whatever's next.
Yeah, well, this is kind of weird. I never went on this attraction, and I've always been, I don't think I've ever mentioned this on the show, I've always been fascinated by, just airplanes and airports in general. I remember when I was a kid, my favorite thing about going on vacation, or one of my favorite things, was always waking up 6 in the morning and then getting to the airport, just seeing all the planes I don't know, something about that always fascinated me. So this does feel like an attraction that I would have loved to experience.
Yeah, I think you might have.
as a small child. I don't know, it's kind of a weird fascination that I had. I've never really mentioned that on the show. But airplanes, you guys
get help.
I probably should, guys, after the show, if you guys know anybody. But but even to this day, I love airplanes. But we do have one final voicemail here from Mr. Gary. I think I'm reading the transcript here. I don't remember getting a voicemail from Gary.
It's probably Jared, because
Jared.
he said I sent another
There
voicemail.
Jared. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what Mr. Jared has to say about Delta Dreamflight in the Magic Kingdom.
Hey, this is Jared again, and since we're talking about Delta Dreamflight, this is an attraction that's very weird to me because it's so, it's probably, in terms of setup, the most ridiculous attraction in Disney history. In its development, it's just Delta wants us to make an attraction. Let's quickly redo this old one that we have in Magic Kingdom, and it's got to be free and all this stuff. It's attraction that this ride shouldn't be good, yet it's it feels like they put way too much effort in it than they needed to. It felt like Imagineering just said, you know what, let's just put a lot of effort in this for no reason. And so you get this weird mix of I don't know, it's like Soarin' kind. There's like parts that are like Soarin', but there's also parts that are like sort of, I would say, like World of Motion / Horizons-esque, where you're going through these physical sets. It's such a weird attraction, and for some reason the music's really good. Like it's one of my favorite Disney park soundtracks, like in its entirety. Just I think the theme song's really good for some reason. Like the lyrics are super campy, but the melody's really good. I don't know. It's a very weird attraction in my book, and I definitely feel like I kind of wish I went on it. I'm too young to have ever gone on it, but I kind of wish I went on it because it feels like something that's so weird, and just like it's this weird blip in Disney history that it's just like. It's just so interesting to me that I kind of wish I was able to go on it. But, that's my thoughts on this attraction. And it's definitely a weird one, but, I really am enjoying your views on this attraction. And, I'll see you guys, maybe I'll call you probably guys next week unless something else pops up this podcast.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Jared.
Yeah, it's funny because Jared's username used to be Superstar Limo.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And he doesn't think that's the weirdest attraction.
Oh, anyway. My gosh. He's trying to cover up that part of his past. He's trying to cover up.
Talk about attractions I wish I was able to ride.
Right.
Oh, you never... Oh,
I know.
man.
My first
Did
trip
I
out
go
west.
on Superstar Limo? Oh, boy.
As somebody who grew up watching Mystery Science Theater and grew an appreciation for things that could sometimes be so bad they're good again.
Yeah.
Like the second I read about that attraction, I was like, I wish I rode it. It sounds amazing.
Guys, tune in next week for Superstar Limo Attraction Retrospective.
Oh my god.
Oh goodness.
It was the most absurd thing. And I think that's also an example of like sometimes if you lean too heavily into things that are entirely pop culture for like one television network, it's like outdated a month later. Interesting.
Well, we'll get into that next week when we talk about at length.
No.
Just kidding, of course. We're just kidding. But anyways, thank you again, Mr. Jared, for that lovely, lovely voicemail. And, well, I think unless you guys have any final thoughts you'd like to say on Delta Dreamflight, that might be about time to end off this segment. Do you guys have any final thoughts you'd like to say?
Yeah, surprisingly enough, growing up, we never flew Delta, so it didn't work.
Oh my gosh, wow. That is just the cherry on top.
That's interesting. Actually, circling back to our more serious conversation about Epcot, corporate sponsorship has never, I don't think it's ever gotten people to buy or use those companies. I don't, we don't walk off Horizons or Carousel of Progress and go wow, General Electric, I need a new washing machine now because of this ride. It's that which is why Disney now has, I think, the money and the resources to still commit to showcasing an idea of the future without the corporate sponsorship. Anyway, we don't need to get back on that.
Yeah, well, that was a great little point to add there. I agree. Well, I have to say I have had thoughts about buying a washer and dryer after coming off of Carousel of Progress, so I don't know. Maybe Jeremy rode a different version of the ride than me, but anyways, yeah, I never rode I never went on the ride, but I've never rode Delta either. That is strange. Well, anyways, I think that is going to wrap up this discussion in a neat little bow there. That was our attraction retrospective on Delta Dreamflight. Thank you, Mr. Rob Plays, for choosing that attraction for us to retrospect on. Yeah, it's a nice break because we've just been talking about we've done Pirates, last week we did the submarine voyage, we've done
yeah, that was good.
Yeah, submarine voyage was surprisingly really well. So it's nice to take a break from those attractions and move on to this one. But anyways, I think that is time to end off today's episode. And of course, I'd like to reiterate, if you guys would still like to leave voicemails, you can do so. You don't have to be watching the show live to leave a voicemail. You can do so. Maybe if you listen on Wednesday and you're thinking, oh, I went on Delta Dream Flight. I want to tell these guys about my experience writing it. Maybe you can call in Wednesday, Thursday. Again, 575-386-5814 is the voicemail number. Wow, T-Will said his mom was a flight attendant for Delta, so guys,
wow,
T-Will might be the hero to bring the attraction back to Tomorrowland for all of us. So we'll see, But anyways, again, thank you all for coming out to today's episode, and again, big thank you to Mr. Rob Plays for joining us on the episode. It's always a treat to have Mr. Rob. He's always very insightful, always very a great conversation to talk about. So thank you, Mr. Rob Plays.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
And
good.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back sometime in the future. But Jeremy, of course, thank you as well. Filling in the shoes for Mr. Alex, the historian. I'm just scared of the fact if I didn't have Jeremy, it'd just be me doing the show, probably just by myself. So, yeah.
And I'm literally, I mean, not that I have anything going on, but I'm literally like, I need Sunday clear because Matt cannot do this show by himself.
I think I tried once to do the show by myself, and that was like a horrible train wreck. It's been a while since that happened, but again, thank you to both of you for coming out, and thank you to everybody who chatted in the chat. Of course, all of our social media will be down in the description below. Go subscribe to Mr. Rob Plays. Rob was one of the first Disney YouTube channels that I subscribed to before I started my channel. So shout out to Mr. Rob Plays for being an inspiration for us all. He does make great videos. So again, link in the description.
I was probably watching because I was on that. I discovered that Minecraft server that was like a really amazing scale recreation, and I was like, oh, let me like look up if anyone else has found this on YouTube or whatever. And then that's how I found Rob Plays because he was playing through that server.
It was a fun time. It's shocking when I think back at how long ago it was, and then I try to stop thinking about that.
It feels like yesterday.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Guys, next episode, all three of us playing some Minecraft Disney World for the podcast. That would be something. But
that would be something.
Before I spit out any more horrible ideas, it's time to end the show, everybody. Thank you all again for coming out to today's episode. And again, links to all of our social media will be down in the description. Go subscribe to Rob, follow Jeremy on Twitter, and of course give some love to Mr. Alex, the historian. You guys, he seems to be doing well. The last time I talked to him was, I think, yesterday or the day before. He seems to be handling the move very well. I think he said that sometime this week was his last day in California. He's going to be moving up this next week, so it's the end of an era for Mr. Alex, the historian. I think he's lived in that area. I think even his dad was in that same apartment that he was when he was a kid. I think, if I'm remembering his storytelling correctly. But so yeah, big move for Mr. Alex. I'm sure he'll be happy up there with his sister though. So Alex will be back as soon as he can.
Also this week, look out for a new journey through animation. The Reluctant Dragon will
not really animation,
discussing in depth,
kind of, but
you know, it's on the list. Yeah. It's on the list. So stay tuned for that. That'll be a really fascinating episode you don't want to miss.
Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Jeremy, for plugging that. And I think it's time, everybody. Thank you all for coming to today's episode. And as always, have a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.